The smell of roasted turkey and underlying tension filled the dining room of our family's Victorian mansion. Snow fell softly outside the tall windows, adding a deceptively peaceful backdrop to what I knew would be anything but a peaceful Christmas dinner. I'm Alexander Bennett, though my family insists on calling me Alex. Their way of diminishing everything about me, right down to my name. At 29, I'm the youngest of 3 children and the only one who chose to stay in the family home after graduating college. Not out of necessity, but strategy. A fact my brother Timothy was about to learn the hard way. The antique grandfather clock struck 6 as our housekeeper Maria brought in the last of the side dishes. She caught my eye briefly, a knowing look passing between us. She'd been here 30 years, long enough to see every family drama unfold, including what was about to happen tonight. Alex, my mother Margaret called from her end of the table, do try to sit up straight. The Hendersons are joining us later for dessert. Her voice carried that familiar note of perpetual disappointment, as if my very posture was letting down the entire Bennett legacy. I adjusted my position slightly, smoothing the napkin across my lap. The Hendersons, of course. Mother's attempt to set me up with their son Bradley. Another suitable match I was supposedly lucky to attract, despite my peculiarities, as she called my career choices. Timothy sat across from me, his wife Diane beside him, both dressed like they'd stepped out of a luxury magazine spread. He'd taken over father's investment firm 3 years ago, a position he'd neither earned nor deserved. But in our family, being the firstborn son trumped little things like competence or ethics. My sister Catherine sat near the end, tapping away at her phone despite mother's repeated glares. She'd blown through 2 trust funds and 3 marriages, yet somehow remained the sensible daughter because at least she tried to settle down. Before we begin, Father announced from the head of the table, I think it's time we address the elephant in the room. He set down his wine glass with practiced precision. The future of this house. Ah, here it came. I'd been waiting for this moment for exactly 3 years, 2 months, and 15 days. As you know, he continued, this property has been in the Bennett family for 4 generations. With the recent changes in the market, certain decisions need to be made. What he meant was that his investment firm, now Timothy's investment firm, had lost several major clients. The kind of losses that made people whisper at country club gatherings. The kind that forced selling of assets. Timothy leaned forward, unable to contain his smirk. What Father's trying to say, Alex, is that it's time for you to find your own place. We're selling the house. I took a small sip of water, letting the moment stretch. Is that so? Don't act surprised, Catherine chimed in, finally looking up from her phone. You can't have expected to live here forever. Some of us have actual families to think about. By actual families, she meant her latest fiancé and his 3 children from 2 previous marriages. The fiancé who, unknown to her, had already blown through most of her remaining trust fund on a failed yacht charter business in Miami. The market's quite good right now, Timothy continued, his voice taking on that condescending tone he perfected since childhood. I have several interested buyers already. High-end developers. They'll probably tear it down, build luxury condos. Mother's hand flew to her throat. Tear it down. But Timothy, darling, this house is just a house, Mother. He cut her off. Progress demands change. Besides, Alex needs to learn to stand on her own 2 feet. You have 1 week to pack your things and leave. I set down my water glass carefully. That's interesting, Tim. Tell me more about these developers. He preened slightly, always eager to show off his business acumen. Prestigious firms. Top dollar. Of course, you wouldn't understand the complexities of such deals. Actually, I said, reaching for my briefcase beside my chair, I understand completely. That's why I had my team research them thoroughly 3 months ago when they first approached me. The room went still. Your team. Father's voice carried the first note of uncertainty I'd heard in years. I smiled, pulling out a thick folder. Yes, my legal team. You see, they were quite concerned about the potential buyer's history of fraudulent dealings, especially given my position as the property owner. Timothy's fork clattered against his plate. What are you talking about? Oh, did I forget to mention? I laid the property deed on the table. I bought this house 2 years ago, through a holding company, of course, when Great Aunt Adelaide's estate was sold. Impossible, Father snapped. The house was tied up in the family trust. It wasn't for sale. The trust you borrowed against repeatedly to cover the firm's losses. I raised an eyebrow. The same trust you defaulted on last spring. The bank was quite happy to sell to a buyer with liquid assets and excellent credit. They particularly appreciated my cash offer. Mother's face had gone pale. Catherine's phone slipped from her fingers. You're lying, Timothy sputtered. This is some kind of joke. Would you like to see the documentation? I opened the folder. I have everything here. The deed, the transfer records, even the receipts for the property taxes I've been paying while letting you all live here rent-free. But your job, Mother whispered. You work in that little tech startup. I laughed softly. That little tech startup went public last year. I'm the Chief Innovation Officer and one of the founding partners. Did none of you ever actually Google my company? We're valued at just over $4 billion. The silence that followed was deafening. Outside, the snow continued to fall, adding another pristine layer to the grounds I legally owned. So, I continued, about that 1-week notice to vacate. I think 24 hours is more appropriate, don't you? After all, progress demands change. Timothy's face had turned an alarming shade of red. You can't do this. We're family. Family? I pulled out another document. Like when you forged my signature to access my trust fund last year. Or when you mortgaged this house to cover your gambling debts. His mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Diane suddenly became very interested in her napkin. How did you? Father started. No, I finished for him. I know everything. Every loan, every fraud, every secret account. And after tomorrow, so will the SEC. The grandfather clock chimed again, its sound echoing through the stunned silence. But I wasn't finished. There was one more revelation to come. One that would shake the Bennett family to its very core. Now, I said calmly, let's talk about what really happened to Great Aunt Adelaide's original will, the one that disappeared the night before she died, the one Timothy visited her about in the hospital. Timothy's face went from red to white faster than I thought possible, because he knew what was coming next would destroy not just his reputation, but everything he'd schemed and stolen to build. Maria quietly began clearing the untouched dinner plates, her movements precise and careful, like someone trying not to startle a room full of cornered animals. The turkey had gone cold, forgotten in the wake of my revelation. The night before Great Aunt Adelaide died, I continued, pulling out a USB drive. The hospital security cameras recorded something interesting. Would you like to see it, Timothy? Or should I just describe how you threatened our dying aunt to change her will? Stop. Timothy's voice cracked. His perfectly pressed collar suddenly seemed to be choking him. Why stop? Isn't this what family dinners are for? Sharing memories? I connected the drive to my tablet. The footage is quite clear. You entering her room at 11:42 p.m. The nurse's statement confirmed she heard you shouting. Something about deserving the inheritance more than your worthless sisters. Mother's hand trembled as she reached for her wine glass. Timothy, what is she talking about? Nothing, he snapped. She's making this up. Really? I turned the tablet screen toward them, because the video shows you leaving with documents at 12:37 a.m., and exactly 6 hours later, Aunt Adelaide was dead. The original will, mysteriously missing. The new one, hastily signed under suspicious circumstances, left everything to you. Catherine had gone very still. The inheritance, the money you loaned me for my divorce settlement, was stolen. I finished for her. All of it. From the estate, from my trust fund, from this house's equity. Timothy's been running a pyramid scheme for years, using family assets to cover his trading losses. Diane suddenly stood, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor. I need some air. Sit down, I said firmly. You helped him forge the documents. The SEC has your signatures too. She sank back down, color draining from her face. You've been investigating us. Father's voice carried more bewilderment than anger. Your own family? No, Father. I've been protecting myself. Ever since I found the original will in Timothy's office safe 3 years ago. Timothy's head snapped up. You broke into my office? Actually, your secretary let me in. Remember Linda? The one you fired for incompetence when she threatened to expose your affair with the investor's liaison? I smiled slightly. She's been working for my tech company ever since, keeping excellent records. The sound of Mother's wine glass shattering against the floor made everyone jump. Maria moved to clean it up, but I raised my hand, stopping her. Leave it, I said softly. In fact, Maria, why don't you take the rest of the evening off? With full pay, of course, and don't worry about your job. You'll still have one after they're gone. You can't just. Father started, but I cut him off. Can't just what? Protect loyal employees? Make business decisions about my own property? Don't worry, Father. Maria's contract is ironclad, unlike the documentation Timothy used to embezzle from the family firm. I opened another folder, spreading out bank statements and transaction records across the table like a grotesque Christmas dinner centerpiece. 14 shell companies, I narrated, pointing to highlighted sections. 23 fraudulent accounts. Over $12 million in misappropriated funds. Did you really think nobody would notice? I was protecting our legacy, Timothy shouted, mask finally cracking. The firm was failing. Father's investments were worthless. Timothy. Father's face had gone purple. What have you done? What you taught me to do, Timothy snarled. Appearances matter more than anything, right? Keep up the family name at any cost? Cost? I laughed softly. Let's talk about cost. The cost of sending me to boarding school at 12 because I was difficult. The cost of cutting off my college fund because I chose tech instead of finance. The cost of believing Timothy's lies about my mental instability when I tried to warn you about his schemes. I stood, walking to the window. Outside, the snow had begun falling harder, nature's curtain drawing across the estate I now controlled. But here's the real cost. I turned back to them. Tomorrow morning, the SEC will receive documentation of every fraudulent transaction. The FBI will get proof of Timothy's involvement in Great Aunt Adelaide's death. And the family firm will be revealed as the house of cards it's become. You'll destroy us, Mother whispered. No, Mother. You did that yourselves. I'm just turning on the lights. Catherine, who had been unusually quiet, finally spoke. What about me? My trust fund is gone, I confirmed. Timothy emptied it months ago, just like he did with mine, just like he's been doing with the firm's pension fund. By the way, your new fiancé? He knows. He's been helping Timothy hide the money offshore. Catherine's face crumpled. Another expensive engagement ring turned to dust. But I'm not completely heartless, I continued. I've arranged for a small stipend for you, Catherine, enough to live modestly while you finally finish that degree you abandoned. And Mother, there's a comfortable condo waiting in Palm Beach. Your social circle won't be quite as grand, but you won't be destitute. And me? Timothy's voice was barely audible. I smiled, the same cold smile he'd given me countless times over the years. You get exactly what you deserve. A 6S8 cell with a lovely view of the exercise yard. Unless, of course, you'd like to make a deal. Hope flickered across his face. What kind of deal? Tell them the truth, I said simply. All of it. About Adelaide, about the firm, about every scheme and lie. Give them closure before you go away. Timothy looked around the table, at our shell-shocked parents, at his trembling wife, at Catherine's tears. For the first time in his life, he had no moves left to make. It started 6 years ago, he began, voice shaking, when Father made me CEO. But what he revealed next would shake our family's foundation even more than my previous revelations. Because Timothy's crimes went far beyond money. They struck at the very heart of what had torn our family apart decades ago. Timothy's confession spilled out like poison from an old wound, each word making our mother flinch, our father age, and Catherine's tears fall faster. The firm was already failing when Father made me CEO, he continued, staring at his hands. His investments in oil had tanked. The real estate venture in Dubai was a disaster. But we kept up appearances, using Adelaide's trust fund to cover the gaps. My sister's money, Father whispered. You stole from my sister? You taught me well, Father. Timothy's laugh was hollow. Remember when Alex was 12? When she found those irregularities in the family books? I remembered. It was the reason they'd sent me to boarding school. Difficult child, needs discipline, they'd said. In reality, I discovered their first round of financial fraud. But that's not the worst part. Timothy's voice dropped lower. The night Adelaide died, she knew everything. She'd hired a forensic accountant, was planning to expose us all. Mother's face went ash white. Us. All. Tell them, Father. Timothy's eyes had taken on a strange, fevered gleam. Tell them who really started this. Who taught me how to create shell companies, hide assets, manipulate accounts? Father stood so abruptly his chair toppled backward. Be quiet. No. I cut in. Let him finish. Though I already know, I found your old records, Father. The ones hidden in the false bottom of your study drawer. Records going back 30 years. Catherine made a small, broken sound. Daddy? It was for the family. Father's voice cracked. Everything I did was to maintain our position, our name, including sending me away. I asked quietly, including believing Timothy when he said I was unstable, turning the whole family against me when I tried to warn you about the firm's collapse. You were too smart, he whispered, too observant, just like Adelaide. The truth hung in the air like smoke, choking us all. So when she threatened to expose you, I continued, Timothy handled it, just like you taught him to handle problems. But he got sloppy, left evidence. I pulled out one final document, a hospital record showing elevated levels of potassium in Adelaide's last blood test. Levels that couldn't be explained by her condition. Did you know about this part, Father? Did you know your son graduated from fraud to murder? Mother ran from the room, the sound of her retching echoing from the hallway. Diane sat frozen, her expensive manicure digging half-moons into her palms. I didn't. Father stumbled back. Timothy, tell me you didn't. The family name? Timothy's voice was eerily calm now. Above all else, protect the family name. Your words, Father. Your lessons. I stood, gathering my documents. The police will be here in approximately 10 minutes. I called them before dinner. You're having us arrested? On Christmas? Catherine's voice rose hysterically. No, Catherine. I'm having Timothy and Father arrested. You and Mother have different consequences. I handed her an envelope. Your new apartment lease, first year paid, along with enrollment papers for the community college nearest your new home. Time to build a real life. She took the envelope with trembling hands. Why? Why help me? Because you were a victim too. Spoiled and enabled, yes, but not criminal. Not like them. The sound of sirens grew in the distance. Timothy made a move toward the door, but I pulled out my phone. The house is surrounded. My security team has been in place all evening. Security team? Diane finally spoke. Did you really think I'd confront financial fraudsters and a murderer without protection? I smiled slightly. I learned something from this family after all. Always have a backup plan. The front door opened, and heavy footsteps filled the hallway. 2 police detectives entered the dining room, followed by FBI agents. Mr. Bennett, Mr. Timothy Bennett, the lead detective announced. You're under arrest for financial fraud, embezzlement, and in your case, Timothy, the suspected murder of Adelaide Bennett. As they read them their rights, Mother returned, leaning heavily against the doorframe. I walked to her, holding out another envelope. The condo in Palm Beach, I said softly. It's peaceful. Far from all of this. There's enough money in the account I've set up to live comfortably, if not extravagantly. Why? She whispered. After everything we did to you. Because hate takes too much energy. And I'd rather use mine building something new. As they led Father and Timothy away in handcuffs, I walked to the window, watching the snow blanket their footprints, erasing all trace of their passage from my property. 3 months later, I stood in the same dining room, but everything had changed. The heavy drapes had been replaced with light, modern panels. The oppressive oil paintings of stern Bennett ancestors had given way to local artists' work. The room was filled with light, air, and the sound of children's laughter. I'd converted the mansion into a technology education center for underprivileged youth. The same rooms that had once hosted cold family dinners now held coding classes, robotics workshops, and entrepreneurship seminars. Maria still ran the household, but now as the center's operations manager, with full benefits and a salary that reflected her true worth. Catherine had finished her first semester of community college with straight A's. She was studying social work, determined to help other families avoid our mistakes. Mother was finding peace in Palm Beach, volunteering at a local library, and, surprisingly, showing talent as a children's storyteller. Timothy and Father were serving their sentences, 20 years for Timothy, 12 for Father. Diane had filed for divorce and turned state's evidence, receiving probation in exchange for her cooperation. The family firm had been dissolved, its legitimate assets used to repay the victims of their fraud. The Bennett name no longer carried weight in financial circles, but I was building a new legacy, one based on innovation, education, and genuine value. I sat in my office, once father's study, reading the latest update from the Education Center's program director. Enrollment had doubled. Our first class of coding students was already receiving job offers. My phone buzzed. A text from Catherine. Got my midterm results. All is again. Thank you for the second chance. I smiled, looking out at the grounds where children now played in the snow, their laughter replacing the echoes of old arguments and older lies. On my desk sat a small photo of Great Aunt Adelaide, her eyes twinkling with the same love of truth and justice that had eventually cost her life, but had also, finally, brought change. The house is still in the family, I told her picture quietly. Just a different kind of family now, a better one. Outside, the snow began to fall again, but this time it felt like renewal rather than burial. Sometimes I'd learned the best revenge isn't destroying what others built. It's building something better in its place. As evening fell, I walked the halls of what was now the Bennett Technology Education Center, listening to the happy chatter of the last students leaving for the day. In the dining room, a group of teenage girls was finishing a coding project, their laptops occupying the same space where that fateful Christmas dinner had shattered my family's illusions. One of them looked up. "Ms. Bennett, can you help us with this algorithm?" I sat down at the table, right where I'd sat 3 months ago, but this time surrounded by hope rather than hostility. "Of course," I said, smiling. "Let's build something amazing. Because that's what real power is. Not the ability to destroy, but the strength to create something new from the ashes of what was lost." And in that, I had finally found my true inheritance. Before heading to the board meeting, I made one crucial stop. The small coffee shop on Oak Street looked exactly as it had 15 years ago. Martha, my grandmother's best friend and former Bennett Industries head of accounting, sat at our usual corner table. "I wondered when you'd visit today," she smiled, pushing a cup of coffee toward me. At 78, her eyes were still sharp as ever. "It's time, isn't it?" I nodded, settling into the chair. "They never knew it was you who taught me how to read corporate financial statements when I was 16. Or that you helped me understand what they were really doing with the company." Martha had been the one who opened my eyes years ago, showing me how my father and Marcus manipulated numbers, hid losses, and played fast and loose with investor funds. She'd been forced into early retirement when she threatened to report their practices. "Your grandmother would be proud," Martha said softly. "She always said you were the one who truly understood the value of things." I touched the emerald pendant at my neck, my grandmother's last gift before she passed. They're about to learn exactly how much I understood. At precisely 1:55 p.m., I walked into Bennett Industries' main conference room. The tension was palpable. Board members sat rigid in their chairs, papers spread before them. My father stood at the head of the table, trying to project confidence. Marcus slouched in a corner, his usual smirk replaced by barely concealed panic. Mom sat near the door, her designer outfit slightly less perfect than usual. She probably spent the morning discovering just how many of her social connections depended on my anonymous donations. "Let's begin," I said clearly, taking a seat directly opposite my father. "This meeting was called," Dad started, but I cut him off. "This meeting was called because I triggered the shareholder rights clause requiring disclosure of significant ownership changes." I opened my laptop. Shall we look at the numbers? The projector hummed to life, displaying a complex web of shell companies, investment vehicles, and stock transfers. 3 years of careful acquisition, all leading to this moment. As of this morning, I continued, these entities collectively own 47% of Bennett Industries' voting shares. The room erupted in murmurs. Dad gripped the edge of the table. That's impossible, Marcus burst out. The family trust controls majority shares. Correction, I smiled. The family trust controlled majority shares until you used them as collateral for your failed Pacific Shores development project last year. A project that, coincidentally, was purchased at bankruptcy auction by one of my investment groups. Marcus went pale. How did you? No? Unlike you, I actually read the financial reports. All of them, including the ones you tried to bury. I turned to the board members. Would anyone like to see the real numbers from the last 3 years? The ones that don't appear in the official statements. This is blackmail, Dad snapped. No, this is business. I stood up slowly. You taught me that, remember? Everything's negotiable. Everything has a price. What do you want? A board member asked, his voice shaking slightly. Transparency, accountability, and I paused, looking directly at my father, a change in leadership. You can't seriously expect, Marcus started. Actually, I can. Because in addition to my shares, I also hold proxy voting rights for the Miller Group. I let that sink in. The Miller Group, our largest institutional investor, controlled another 15% of shares. Dad sank into his chair. Catherine Miller is a personal friend. Catherine Miller is a businesswoman who recognizes competence over nepotism. I clicked to the next slide. She's also aware of certain irregularities in the company's handling of her investments. Irregularities that I've documented extensively. The room fell silent. Years of mismanagement, hidden losses, and questionable deals, all meticulously recorded and ready to be exposed. Here's what's going to happen, I said calmly. The board will appoint an independent audit committee. Marcus will resign from all operational roles. And Dad? I met his eyes. You'll announce your retirement. Today. Or what? He challenged, but his voice lacked conviction. Or I call the SEC. I'm sure they'd be very interested in the real story behind Wilson Holdings' collapse, and the Thompson development deal, and about a dozen other transactions I've documented. Mom stood up suddenly. Alexandra, please. This is your family. Family? I turned to her. Was it family when you watched Dad crush every initiative I brought to the company? When you stayed silent as Marcus took credit for my work? When you threatened to disown me if I didn't give up my house? She flinched. I learned what family meant from Grandma, and from people like Martha Stevens. You remember her, don't you, Dad? The accountant you forced out because she wouldn't cook the books. Dad's face contorted. Martha? She's been helping you. She taught me to see what was really happening in this company, and now everyone else will see it too. I distributed folders to each board member. These contain my formal proposal for restructuring Bennett Industries. You'll find it addresses the company's actual financial position, not the one shown in public statements. The next 2 hours were a blur of legal discussions, votes, and resolutions. By the end, the transformation was complete. Dad announced his retirement for health reasons. Marcus was removed from all operational roles, and I became executive chairperson of the board with a mandate to reform the company's governance and operations. As the board members filed out, Dad remained seated, staring at the papers in front of him. "I never thought," he began, "that I could do this," I finished. "That's been the problem all along." "What happens now?" Marcus asked, his arrogance finally shattered. "Now, you'll retain your shares, but have no operational control. Dad will have a comfortable retirement, provided he stays out of company business. And Mom," I turned to her, "the foundation's funding is secure, but its board will be independently managed." "And the mansion?" she asked quietly. "Keep it. Consider it a reminder that sometimes the child you underestimate the most becomes the one you answer to." I gathered my things, pausing at the door. "Oh, and Marcus?" "I bought the Thompson Development Group this morning. Turns out they were eager to sell once they realized who they were really dealing with." The sun was setting as I drove home, to my house, the one I'd refused to sell, the one that had started this whole confrontation. Martha was waiting on my porch, a bottle of champagne in hand. "Your grandmother kept a letter for you," she said, pulling an envelope from her bag. "She asked me to give it to you when the time was right. I think today qualifies." The letter was short, written in my grandmother's elegant hand. "My dearest Alexandra, I've watched you grow into someone extraordinary, someone who sees beyond the surface of things. The emerald pendant I gave you isn't just jewelry. It's the key to a trust I established years ago, one your father knows nothing about. Martha will explain everything. You've proven you know how to build things. Now show them how to build something better than they ever imagined. All my love, Grandma." I touched the pendant again, understanding finally dawning. Martha smiled. "Ready to hear about your grandmother's real legacy?" I nodded, opening my door to welcome her in, because sometimes the best revenge isn't about tearing things down. It's about building something new from the ashes of what they never valued. And as for that house they wanted me to sell, it was never about the property. It was about standing my ground, about refusing to be pushed aside one more time. The next morning, a single email went out to all Bennett Industries employees. Change isn't always comfortable, but it's often necessary. Together, we're going to build something extraordinary. And this time, everyone's voice will matter. Regards, Alexandra Bennett, Executive Chairperson, Bennett Industries. Sometimes the biggest victories come not from the battles we win, but from the lessons we teach along the way. My family had spent years teaching me that I wasn't enough. In the end, I taught them that I was more than they ever imagined. And that house they wanted so badly, I think I'll keep it. After all, it's got a perfect view of the Bennett Industries Tower. A daily reminder that sometimes the best response to "we don't want you" is to become the person they can't ignore. Martha raised her champagne glass. "To your grandmother." "To the future," I corrected, smiling. "And to remembering that some things aren't for sale. Not houses, not principles, and definitely not self-worth." The sun set over the city skyline, painting the sky in shades of victory. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to reshape the company. But for now, sitting in the house I'd refused to give up, I was exactly where I needed to be. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's showing them exactly who you've become while they were busy underestimating you. And I was just getting started. The crystal glasses clinked against bone china as my mother set the table for our mandatory Sunday dinner. Everything had to be perfect, as always. The Williams family image needed to be maintained, even if it was just for show. I'm Emily Williams, though my family barely acknowledges the Williams part anymore. At 32, I'm the disappointment who chose to work in tech instead of joining the family's luxury car dealership empire. the black sheep who wore jeans to country club meetings and suggested modernizing our accounting systems when I was just 19. Emily, my mother called from the dining room, her voice carrying that familiar note of disapproval. Your father wants everyone here by 6 sharp. And please, wear something appropriate this time. I glanced down at my casual blazer and silk blouse. The outfit probably cost more than her entire dining set, but she'd never know that. I'd learned long ago to keep my success quiet, to let them think I was struggling in my little computer job, as they called it. If they only knew. The truth was, I'd been 3 steps ahead of them for years. While they bragged about their 5 dealerships across the state, I was building something much bigger. But tonight, everything would change. They'd forced my hand, and now it was time to show them exactly who they'd been looking down on all these years. I arrived at 5:55 p.m., parking my modest Volvo behind my brother, Marcus's shiny new Porsche. He'd always been the golden child, following in our father's footsteps, playing the part of the dutiful son. He was also running their business into the ground with his gambling habit and risky investments, but heaven forbid anyone mentioned that at Sunday dinner. The house was exactly as it had been since my childhood, a sprawling colonial mansion that screamed old money, even though our family's wealth only went back 2 generations. My grandfather had built the dealership from nothing, but my father, Richard Williams, preferred to pretend we had blue blood going back centuries. You're almost late, my mother said by way of greeting, eyeing my clothes with barely concealed disdain. Almost isn't late, Mom, I replied, hanging my coat in the foyer. How's the new country club membership going? She stiffened slightly. They didn't know I knew about their rejection from the Preston Valley Club, the 3rd such rejection this year. Their social standing wasn't what it used to be, though they were desperately trying to hide it. In the dining room, Marcus was already seated, his wife Jessica beside him, both of them looking like they'd stepped out of a luxury car commercial. My father stood at the head of the table, swirling his whiskey like he was starring in his own movie about wealthy patriarchs. Emily, he nodded curtly. Glad you could tear yourself away from your computers. I smiled, taking my seat. If he only knew that those computers had helped me build a tech empire worth billions, or that I owned controlling shares in 3 major software companies. But tonight wasn't about my success. It was about their failure and the choice they were about to make. Now that everyone's here, my father began, setting down his glass with practiced authority, we need to discuss some family business. Here it comes, I thought, maintaining my calm expression. The dealerships are entering an exciting new phase of expansion, he continued, though I could see the strain around his eyes. We're planning to acquire 3 new locations by year's end. I knew this was a lie. Their latest financial reports, which they didn't know I had access to, showed they were barely staying afloat. Marcus's gambling debts and failed side ventures had boiled them dry, and their attempts to compete with modern car-buying apps were failing miserably. That's wonderful, dear, my mother beamed, passing the roasted potatoes. Emily, you really should reconsider joining the family business. It's not too late to give up this coding phase. I took a small serving of potatoes, noting how Jessica's hand trembled slightly as she reached for her wine glass. She knew about Marcus's debts, had probably been the one writing checks to cover them. Actually, my father cleared his throat. That's part of what we need to discuss. Emily, your grandfather's trust fund, the one you've been using as collateral for business loans, I interrupted quietly. The room went silent. My father's face reddened slightly. How did you? He started, but caught himself. That's privileged information. Is it? I took a sip of water. Like the 3 rejected loan applications this month, or the foreclosure notice on the downtown dealership? Marcus's fork clattered against his plate. Dad, what is she talking about? Nothing, my father snapped. Emily's obviously been poking around where she doesn't belong. But that ends now. He straightened in his chair, attempting to reclaim his authority. We're cutting you off, Emily. No more trust fund, no more family support. Clearly you don't understand loyalty or family values. My mother gasped appropriately, right on cue. Jessica stared at her plate. Marcus tried to smirk but couldn't quite manage it. I set down my water glass carefully. Before you continue, Dad, maybe you should take a look at this. I pulled out my phone, opening a particular folder I'd prepared for this moment. What's that supposed to be? He scoffed. The truth, I said simply, turning the screen toward him, about who really owns Williams Automotive Group. All of it. As my father's eyes scanned the document, his face went from red to white faster than I thought possible. Because there, in clear corporate documentation, was proof that his daughter, the one he was about to cut off, had secretly become his company's majority shareholder 6 months ago. And that was just the beginning of what I had to show them. The silence that followed felt like a vacuum, sucking all the air from my mother's perfectly decorated dining room. My father's hands trembled as he held my phone, his eyes locked on the screen that showed exactly who owned his precious empire. This is impossible, he finally managed, his voice barely above a whisper. Is it? I took my phone back, swiping to the next document. Like it was impossible that Marcus lost $2.4 million at the Bellagio last month. Or impossible that Mom's been forging your signature on loan applications. My mother's wine glass slipped from her fingers, splashing red across her pristine white tablecloth. Marcus looked like he might vomit. How did you? Jessica started, but I cut her off. How did I know? Or how did I acquire controlling interest in a company that's been hemorrhaging money for years? I pulled out my laptop, opening it to a presentation I'd prepared. Let me show you exactly how the daughter you dismissed built an empire right under your noses. The screen displayed a simple timeline, starting 8 years ago. Remember when I suggested modernizing our systems, Dad? When I said cryptocurrency and tech investments were the future? You laughed. Called it internet funny money. Well, I clicked to the next slide, showing my first company's valuation. $500 million. That's just the beginning. I continued, watching their faces drain of color. While you were busy buying country club memberships and covering up Marcus's gambling, I was building something real. My father found his voice. You're lying. These numbers are all verified, I interrupted, by the same accountants who've been trying to warn you about the dealership's imminent collapse. Would you like to see their latest report? I clicked again, displaying the devastating financial analysis of Williams Automotive Group. Red numbers filled the screen. Debts, losses, failed investments. Did you really think nobody would notice the shell companies Marcus set up to hide his casino losses? I asked, turning to my brother. Or the way Mom's been moving money between accounts to cover the bounced checks. Marcus slumped in his chair, his perfect posture finally breaking. Jessica reached for her purse, probably checking for her car keys, planning her escape. But here's what really interested me, I continued, clicking to another document. The loan applications. 3 different banks, all using grandfather's trust fund as collateral. The same trust fund you just tried to take from me. My mother's hands fluttered to her throat, a nervous tell I remembered from childhood. Emily, Darling, we can explain. No need. I cut in. The SEC will handle the explanations. They're very interested in some of these transactions. The word SEC hit like a thunderbolt. My father's face went from white to gray. You wouldn't, he whispered. We're family. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Family? Was it family when you told potential investors I was mentally unstable because I warned them about Marcus's schemes? Or when you tried to have me removed from grandfather's trust because I refused to invest in your failing expansion plans? I stood, walking to the window that overlooked their perfectly manicured lawn. 6 months ago, I could have reported everything: the fraud, the embezzlement, the forged documents. But instead, I did something better. I started buying shares through various shell companies. Small amounts at first, then larger ones as your desperation grew. Every time Marcus needed to cover a gambling debt, every time Mom's credit cards got maxed out, I was there, buying up pieces of the company at bargain prices. Why? Marcus finally spoke, his voice cracking. Why not just turn us in? I turned back to face them. Because grandfather built this company from nothing. He believed in honest work, in building something real. And watching you destroy it piece by piece, I couldn't let that happen. I clicked to the final slide. It showed my complete portfolio, not just the dealerships, but my tech companies, real estate holdings, and investment funds. The total number at the bottom made my mother actually gasp. That's, my father squinted at the screen. That's over $3 billion. 3.7, I corrected quietly. And that's just the liquid assets. Jessica stood abruptly. I need some air. Sit down, I said firmly. Everyone needs to hear this next part. She sank back into her chair, looking like she might faint. Tomorrow morning, the board of directors will receive a complete audit of the company's finances. Every transaction, every hidden account, every forged signature. They'll also receive my proposal for restructuring. Restructuring? My father's voice had lost all its usual authority. Yes, you have 2 choices. I closed my laptop carefully. Option 1, you all resign immediately. Sign the paperwork I've prepared, admit to your roles in the financial misconduct, and accept the consequences. In return, I'll ensure the company survives and your reputations aren't completely destroyed. The room was so quiet, you could hear the antique grandfather clock ticking in the hall. And option 2? Marcus asked, though his tone suggested he already knew. I smiled, the same cold smile my father had given me countless times over the years. Option 2 is I step back and let the SEC handle everything. They're particularly interested in those offshore accounts you set up last month, Marcus. The ones in Jessica's maiden name. Jessica's head snapped up, her eyes wide with betrayal as she stared at her husband. Apparently, she hadn't known about those accounts. You have until midnight to decide, I continued, gathering my things. Though given the federal agents currently parked outside the downtown dealership, I'd suggest deciding quickly. My father stood suddenly, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. You planned all this? Tonight? The dinner? Everything? No, Dad. You planned this. Every time you dismissed me, every time you covered up Marcus's mistakes, every time you chose appearance over reality, you planned this. I just took notes and waited. I walked to the door, then paused. Oh, and Mom? The Preston Valley Country Club didn't reject your application. I bought it last year and had them blacklist you. Consider it payback for all those holiday dinners you forgot to invite me to. The sound of my mother bursting into tears followed me out into the hallway. But I wasn't finished. There was one more revelation to come. One that would shake this family to its very foundation. I turned back one last time. Before you make your decision, you might want to ask Marcus about the real reason grandfather changed his will 2 days before he died. About the conversation they had in the hospital, and the security camera footage I have from that night. Marcus's face went completely blank. He knew exactly what I was talking about. And soon, so would everyone else. The next morning dawned clear and cold, the kind of autumn day my grandfather used to love. I sat in his old office at the downtown dealership, now my office, watching the sun rise over the city he'd helped build. The leather chair still smelled faintly of his cigars, a scent that had always meant safety and wisdom to me. My phone had been buzzing since 5 a.m. First Jessica, then my mother, then a stream of family friends and business associates. I let them all go to voicemail. They had years to listen. Now they could wait. At exactly 9:00 a.m., my assistant knocked on the door. "They're here." I nodded, straightening the files on my grandfather's mahogany desk. "Send them in." My family filed in like mourners at a funeral. My father had aged overnight, his usual swagger replaced by a haunted stoop. My mother's makeup couldn't hide her sleepless night. Marcus looked hungover, and Jessica kept her distance from him, her wedding ring conspicuously absent. "Sit," I said quietly, gesturing to the chairs arranged before the desk. They sat without argument, a first in family history. "Before we discuss your decisions," I began, "let's address what happened in this room 8 months ago." I pressed a button on my laptop, and the large screen on the wall flickered to life. Security camera footage appeared, showing this very office. The timestamp read 11:47 p.m., the night before my grandfather died. Marcus entered, looking furtive. Our grandfather sat in the same chair I now occupied. "Turn it off," Marcus pleaded. "No," I said firmly. "Everyone needs to see this." On screen, Marcus paced, agitated. The audio was crystal clear. "You can't change the will, Grandpa. You can't give everything to Emily." Our grandfather's voice, though weak, carried his characteristic steel. "Emily understands business, Marcus. Real business, not just appearances. She'll preserve my legacy." "She abandoned the family," Marcus shouted. "She plays with computers while I've given everything to this company." "Given?" Grandfather laughed weakly. "You've taken boy. Stolen. Gambled. I know about Geneva." My mother gasped. Geneva, where Marcus had lost $5 million of company money in a single weekend. "Emily figured it out," Grandfather continued on screen. "Brought me the proof weeks ago. But unlike you, she wanted to protect the family name. Give you a chance to make it right." The next part was harder to watch. Marcus, desperate and angry, grabbing our grandfather's heart medication, holding it out of reach. "Sign it back to me," he demanded. "Right now." Instead, Grandfather pressed the silent alarm under his desk. As security rushed in, he looked directly at the camera, directly at me, watching now, and mouthed, "Trust Emily." He died the next morning. The official cause was heart failure. I stopped the footage. The room was deathly silent. "The police have a copy of this," I said into the quiet, along with the toxicology report showing elevated levels of stress hormones from that confrontation. "You killed him," my mother whispered, staring at Marcus. "Your greed killed your own grandfather." Marcus buried his face in his hands. Jessica had moved even further away from him, her face a mask of disgust. "Now," I continued, opening the first file on the desk, "let's discuss your decisions about my offer." My father cleared his throat. "We'll sign whatever you want." "Good, because what I want is to set things right." I started distributing documents. "Here's how this will work." Over the next hour, I laid out the new reality. My father would take early retirement, citing health reasons. Marcus would enter a private rehabilitation program for his gambling addiction, non-negotiable and closely monitored. My mother would step down from all charity boards, social clubs, and public positions. "The company will survive," I explained, watching them sign page after page. "I've already lined up partnerships with 3 major tech firms to modernize our sales platform. The Williams name will continue to mean something in this city, just not what you thought it meant." "And us?" my mother asked quietly. "What happens to us?" I leaned back in grandfather's chair. "You'll receive living allowances. Modest ones, enough to maintain decent lives, but not your current excesses. Marcus's debts will be paid off to prevent legal consequences, but he'll work a regular job, earning regular wages, once he completes rehabilitation." "A regular job?" Marcus looked horrified. "Yes, Marcus, like regular people, like I did when I started my tech company, working 80-hour weeks while you were flying private jets to Monaco." I turned to Jessica. "You have a choice too. The prenup Marcus had you sign is void. I've made sure of that. You can leave now with a generous settlement, or stay and accept the new circumstances." She stood without hesitation, placing her keys to their mansion on the desk. "I'll have my lawyer contact yours." With that, she walked out, head high, never looking back at Marcus. My father spoke up, his voice rough. "Why not just destroy us completely? Why show any mercy?" I opened my desk drawer and pulled out an old photograph. In it, a much younger version of my father stood beside my grandfather in front of the first Williams dealership. Both were smiling, proud, genuine. "Because of him," I said, placing the photo on the desk. "Because grandfather believed in redemption. He gave you a chance when you were young, Dad. Now I'm doing the same." I stood, signaling the end of the meeting. "The papers will be filed today. The press release about the reorganization goes out at noon. Your resignations will be described as a planned succession, allowing you all to save face. Don't make me regret this, Mercy." They filed out slowly, shoulders bowed, faces drawn. My mother paused at the door. "You're exactly like him, you know," she said softly. "Your grandfather. We should have seen it sooner." "Yes," I replied. "You should have." After they left, I walked to the window, looking out at the dealership lot where I used to play as a child. The morning sun glinted off rows of new cars, each one representing the legacy my grandfather had built and I had saved. My phone buzzed, a news alert. The technology sector was praising the Williams Automotive Group's innovative new digital sales platform. Our stock was up 12% in pre-market trading. The future was already arriving. I sat back down in my grandfather's chair, opening his old ledger. Inside, he'd written something on the last page just days before his death. "Dear Emily, power isn't about controlling others. It's about controlling yourself when others give you reason not to. You understand that? It's why you'll succeed where they failed. Love, Grandpa." I closed the ledger, smiling slightly. The empire wasn't just saved, it was transformed. And the daughter they dismissed had become the architect of its future. 3 months later, I stood in the main showroom, watching as our new digital display systems were installed. The Williams Automotive Group had become the talk of the industry, pioneering a hybrid model of online and traditional car sales that was revolutionizing the market. My father had settled into quiet retirement, taking up golf and staying away from business entirely. My mother had found a surprising peace and a simpler life, even starting to volunteer at a local food bank. Marcus was 6 weeks into his rehabilitation program, finally facing his demons. As for me, I kept grandfather's chair, his ledger, and his belief in building something real. The billions I'd earned in tech were now building something even bigger, a legacy that would honor his name and prove that sometimes the greatest revenge isn't destruction, it's construction. Standing there in the gleaming showroom, I took out my phone and deleted all the angry voicemails I'd saved from years of family dinners. I didn't need them anymore. Success isn't about proving others wrong. It's about proving yourself right. And I had done exactly that. I still remember the weight of that envelope in my hands. Heavy, like the secrets it held, like the years of silence I'd carried. My name is Sarah Mitchell, and this is the story of how I learned that family ties aren't always what they seem. The morning started like any other Sunday. I was reviewing patient files in my small medical practice when my mother's text arrived. Family meeting. 3 p.m. Important discussion about Grandma Aliner's estate. Everyone must attend. I knew what this meant. 3 months had passed since Grandma Aliner's funeral, and the family had been circling like vultures around her property ever since. Especially my sister Victoria, who had always been the perfect daughter in my parents' eyes. Growing up, Victoria had mastered the art of appearance, captain of the cheerleading squad, homecoming queen, married to a successful businessman by 23. Meanwhile, I chose a different path. Medical school, long hours, building my own practice from scratch. My parents never understood why I'd waste time on such a demanding career when I could have followed Victoria's example. But Grandma Aliner understood. She was different. A self-made woman who built her real estate empire from nothing in the 1960s, when female business owners were rare. She taught me that success isn't about pleasing others. It's about staying true to yourself. You remind me of myself at your age. She'd tell me during our secret Sunday morning coffee meetings. Never let anyone dim your light, Sarah. What my family didn't know was that those coffee meetings weren't just about advice. They were about legacy. I parked my car outside my parents' Tudor-style home at exactly 2:55 p.m. Victoria's new Mercedes already sat in the driveway, gleaming like a trophy. Inside, the familiar scent of Mom's cinnamon potpourri filled the air, mixing with tension so thick you could cut it with a knife. The living room looked like a stage set for a power play. Mom and Dad sat on their leather sectional, Victoria and her husband James perched beside them like royalty. My younger brother Michael slouched in the corner, scrolling through his phone, trying to look disinterested but failing. "Sarah," Mom said, her voice clipped. "You're late." I checked my watch. 3:01 p.m. Actually, I'm right on time. Victoria smoothed her designer dress, a predatory smile playing at her lips. "Now that we're all here, I have an announcement." She stood, commanding attention like she'd done since high school. "As you know, Grandma Aliner's main property, the Victorian on Maple Street, has been in limbo since her passing. Well, I have wonderful news." She pulled out a document with flourish. "I've been talking with the family lawyer. Since I'm the only one who's married, with a proper family life, it makes sense for James and me to take ownership of the house. We need the space for our growing family, after all." My parents beamed. Of course they did. Victoria was giving them exactly what they wanted. A picture-perfect family to brag about at their country club. The papers just need signatures. Victoria continued, her voice dripping with false sweetness. I'm sure you all agree this is the best arrangement. Sarah's too busy with her little doctor's office to maintain a property like that. And Michael, well, she cast a dismissive glance at our brother. I sat there, letting her words wash over me. 3 months of planning, of watching them scheme, had prepared me for this moment. I reached into my bag and retrieved an envelope, thick, cream-colored, with Grandma Aliner's law firm's letterhead. Before we sign anything, I said quietly, I think we should review all the documents, including this one. Victoria's smile faltered slightly. What's that? Something Grandma Aliner left with her lawyer. Instructions to be revealed only after certain conditions were met. I placed the envelope on the coffee table. The room grew still, like the moment before a storm breaks. What conditions? My father demanded, leaning forward. I smiled, remembering Grandma's words during our last coffee meeting. The condition was waiting to see who would try to claim what wasn't theirs to take. Victoria's face flushed. What are you talking about? I've already spoken with a family lawyer, I interrupted. Yes, I know. Mr. Harrison called me last week. Interesting how you forgot to mention our conversations, Victoria. My sister's perfectly manicured hands clenched into fists. Open it, she snapped. I took my time, carefully breaking the seal. The papers inside were crisp, official, bearing Grandma Aliner's distinctive signature. Read it, I said, sliding the document across the table, especially the last page. I think you'll find it illuminating. As Victoria snatched up the papers, I sat back, remembering all those Sunday mornings with Grandma, all the lessons she taught me about patience, perseverance, and justice. The truth was about to change everything. Victoria's face went from confident to confused to ashen as she read. Her hands began to shake. This can't be right, she whispered. Mom grabbed the papers from Victoria's trembling hands. Her eyes widened as she scanned the contents. 6 months ago, I said into the silence, Grandma Aliner legally transferred ownership of not just the Victorian, but all her properties to me. She also left specific instructions about how the family would react and what that would reveal about their true characters. The room erupted into chaos. Victoria lunged for the papers. My father started shouting about family loyalty, and my mother burst into tears. But I remained calm, just as Grandma had taught me. There's more, I continued, my voice cutting through their protests. Much more. And if you're ready to listen, I'll explain exactly why Grandma Aliner made the choice she did. The story I was about to tell would shatter their perfectly crafted illusions. But sometimes that's exactly what a family needs. The silence that followed felt like glass about to shatter. Victoria stood frozen, the inheritance papers still trembling in her hands. My father's face had turned an alarming shade of red, while my mother dabbed at her eyes with an embroidered handkerchief, always one for dramatics. You manipulated her, Victoria finally spat, her perfectly glossed lips twisting into a snarl. You turned Grandma Aliner against us during those little coffee meetings of yours. I pulled out my phone, scrolling to a video I'd kept safe for months. Actually, Grandma Aliner wanted to explain her decision herself. The family gathered around as I pressed play. Grandma Aliner's face filled the screen, her silver hair neatly styled, her blue eyes sharp as ever. The video had been recorded in her lawyer's office just 2 months before she passed. "If you're watching this," she began, "then exactly what I predicted has happened. Victoria has tried to claim the Victorian house, and your parents have supported her decision without consideration for fairness or truth." Victoria tried to interject, but Dad shushed her, his eyes glued to the screen. "For years," Grandma continued, "I've watched this family's dynamics with growing concern. I've seen how Sarah was treated, pushed aside, criticized for her ambitions, expected to give way to Victoria's demands. But I've also seen something else. I've seen Sarah build a medical practice from nothing, just as I'd built my real estate business. I've seen her help patients who couldn't afford care, quietly paying their bills from her own pocket. Meanwhile, Victoria." Grandma's face hardened. "Victoria and James have been living beyond their means for years. What this family doesn't know is that they've approached me multiple times for loans they never repaid. They've also tried to convince me to sign over properties to them, claiming they could manage them better." My mother gasped. Victoria's face had gone from red to white. "But the final straw," Grandma continued, "was what happened last Christmas. Victoria and James came to me with paperwork, asking me to sign what they claimed was a holiday card. I may be old, but I'm not foolish. It was a transfer deed for my entire portfolio, written in fine print they thought I wouldn't read." The video ended. The silence that followed was deafening. "That's a lie," Victoria shrieked, but her voice wavered. James had suddenly become very interested in his shoes. I pulled out another document from my bag. "Here's the deed they tried to trick her into signing." Grandma kept it as evidence. "Would you like to explain this, Victoria?" My sister's carefully constructed facade began to crack. We were just trying to help manage her affairs. She was getting older. She was sharp as ever." I cut in. "Sharp enough to see through your scheme. Sharp enough to make her own decisions about her legacy." My father finally found his voice. "But why you, Sarah? You've never shown any interest in real estate." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Really, Dad? Did you forget that I helped Grandma modernize all her property management systems 3 years ago? Or that I've been handling the maintenance coordination for her buildings while running my practice?" "Of course you did, because in this family, if Victoria doesn't do it, it doesn't count." "But we're family," my mother pleaded, still clutching her handkerchief. "We can work something out. Split things evenly, like you split your attention evenly when we were growing up," I asked quietly. "Like you split the college fund evenly before giving Victoria my portion for her wedding? Or like you split holidays evenly before deciding Victoria's in-laws were more important?" Michael, who had been silent until now, let out a low whistle. "She's got you there, Mom." I stood up, gathering my things. "The properties stay as Grandma Eleanor intended. I've already met with her management team, reviewed all accounts, and—" I paused, letting the next revelation sink in. "Discovered some interesting financial discrepancies during Victoria and James's brief time helping with the books." James finally looked up, fear flashing across his face. Victoria grabbed his arm, her knuckles white. "What do you mean, discrepancies?" my father demanded. "I think that's a discussion Victoria and James should have with their lawyer," I replied calmly. "I've already forwarded the documentation to the relevant authorities." Victoria lunged forward, her composure completely shattered. "You can't do this to me. I'm your sister." "Yes, you are," I agreed. "And that's exactly why I'm doing this. Family doesn't mean enabling fraud, Victoria. It doesn't mean watching silently while you try to steal from our grandmother." I turned to my parents, who sat shell-shocked on their expensive couch. Grandma Aliner left something for you too. A letter explaining exactly how she felt about your treatment of both your daughters. Would you like to read it now, or should I have it delivered with the rest of the legal documentation? My mother burst into fresh tears. My father's face had moved from red to purple. You'll regret this, Victoria hissed. We're not done. I smiled, remembering Grandma Aliner's words from our last coffee meeting. Actually, Victoria, we are. But don't worry. I'll make sure the Victorians' new owners maintain it beautifully. New owners? James sputtered. What do you mean? I mean, I'm converting it into a medical residence for doctors in training. Affordable housing for people who actually want to help others. Grandma Aliner loved that idea. As I walked toward the door, I heard Victoria's carefully curated world continuing to crumble behind me. But I wasn't finished. There was one more revelation to come, one that would shake this family to its very foundation. I turned back one last time. Oh, and Victoria, you might want to check your mail tomorrow. There's something about your perfect marriage that Grandma Aliner discovered during her final investigation. Something I think Mom and Dad will find very interesting. The color drained from both Victoria and James's faces. They knew exactly what I meant, and tomorrow, everyone else would know too. The next morning dawned crisp and clear, but the storm I'd set in motion was just beginning to break. I sat in my office, reviewing patient files when my phone started buzzing. First my mother, then my father, then a stream of family friends and relatives. I let them all go to voicemail. They'd had years to listen to me. Now it was my turn to control the conversation. At exactly 9:00 a.m., I knew the certified letters had been delivered. I timed everything perfectly, just as Grandma Aliner had taught me. Timing, Sarah, she'd said during one of our last meetings, is the difference between justice and revenge. The first text came from Michael. Holy shit, sis. You weren't kidding about Victoria's marriage. Mom's having a meltdown. I could imagine the scene at my parents' house as they read the private investigator's report Grandma Aliner had commissioned before her death. The report revealed that James and Victoria's perfect marriage was built on a foundation of lies. Not only had James been embezzling from his company, which explained their mysterious wealth, but he has second family in Boston, a wife and 2 children predating his marriage to Victoria. The proof was irrefutable. Marriage certificates, birth certificates, bank statements showing regular transfers, and photos of James at his other son's baseball games just last month. Victoria had to have known. The timeline proved she discovered the truth 3 years ago, but chose to maintain the facade, rather than lose her status as the family's perfect daughter. My phone rang again. This time, it was James. What do you want? I answered coolly. Listen, he said, his voice desperate. We can make a deal. I have connections, money. Stolen money, I interrupted. And no, we can't make a deal. The SEC has already been notified about your creative accounting at work. Grandma Aliner made sure of that before she died. He hung up. Seconds later, Victoria's name flashed on my screen. I let it ring. Instead of answering, I opened my email and sent a pre-written message to our extended family, the country club board where my parents were members, and Victoria's social circle. Not to be cruel, but to ensure the truth couldn't be buried this time. Dear friends and family, in light of recent revelations about fraud, bigamy, and attempted theft from our late grandmother's estate, I feel compelled to share the complete documentation of these events. Attached you'll find verified records that may help explain any sudden changes in Victoria and James's social status or living situation. The truth, though painful, is necessary. Regards, Sarah Mitchell, MD. Within an hour, my parents' house had become ground zero for a Category 5 hurricane of scandal. Victoria's carefully curated world was unraveling thread by thread. At 2:00 p.m., my office door opened. I looked up to find my father standing there, looking older than I'd ever seen him. "You knew," he said quietly. "You knew everything." Grandma Eleanor knew everything. I corrected him. I just helped her document it. He sank into the chair across from my desk. "Your mother, she's not handling this well. And how did she handle it when Victoria stole my college fund? Or when she kicked me out for choosing medical school over the husband Victoria picked for me?" He flinched. "We thought we were doing what was best." "No," I cut him off. "You did what was easiest. Supporting Victoria was always easier than acknowledging that I might have chosen a better path. Can we?" He hesitated. "Can we fix this?" I pulled out another envelope, the last one. "Grandma Eleanor thought you might ask that. She left this for you and Mom. It's not just a letter this time. It's a choice." He took the envelope with trembling hands. Inside, I continued, "You'll find 2 documents. One is a commitment to family therapy, fully paid for by Grandma's estate. The other is a complete severance of family ties, including removal from all trusts and family accounts. You can't be serious." Deadly serious. Grandma Eleanor believed in second chances, but she also believed in earning them. "You have 24 hours to decide. Do you want to rebuild this family the right way? Or do you want to cling to the lies you've told yourselves?" He stared at the envelope for a long moment. "And Victoria has her own choice to make. The evidence of James's fraud has already been submitted to the authorities. She can cooperate with the investigation or go down with him. That's her decision." Just then, my phone buzzed with a text from Michael. "Victoria just tried to access her offshore accounts. They're frozen. She's screaming about buying a ticket to Boston to kill that bastard. Should I call someone?" I smiled slightly. "Justice has its own timeline," I told my father. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have patients waiting." He stood slowly, clutching the envelope like a lifeline. At the door, he paused. "We really messed up, didn't we?" "Yes," I said simply. "But that's not the important part. The important part is what you do next." After he left, I walked to my office window, looking out at the city Grandma Eleanor had helped build. The Victorian house stood in the distance, its elegant spires reaching toward the sky. By next month, it would be full of young doctors, starting their careers with the same determination I'd had. My phone buzzed one final time. A message from Victoria. "I hope you're happy. You've destroyed everything." I typed back a single line. "No, Victoria. You did that yourself. I just turned on the lights." Then I switched off my phone, picked up my next patient's file, and got back to work. Because that's what Grandma Eleanor taught me. Success isn't about destroying others. It's about building something meaningful from the ashes of what they tried to destroy in you. 3 months later, I sat in my favorite coffee shop, the same one where Grandma Eleanor and I used to meet. My parents had chosen therapy, though Victoria hadn't spoken to any of us since James's arrest. Michael had moved into one of the smaller properties, returning to college with a new appreciation for honest work. As I sipped my coffee, I opened Grandma Eleanor's journal, her last gift to me. On the final page, she'd written, Dearest Sarah, remember that strength isn't about having power over others. It's about having the courage to stand firm when others try to take your power away. You've always been my true heir, not because of what you'll inherit, but because of what you've built. Keep building, keep healing, keep standing tall. Love, Grandma Alina. I closed the journal, smiling as I watched the sunrise paint the sky in shades of possibility. Sometimes the greatest inheritance isn't what's written in a will. It's the strength to finally stand up and say, no more. The Victorian house stood proud against the morning light, its windows gleaming with promise. Inside, young doctors were already starting their days, carrying forward the legacy of healing and hope that had always been my true inheritance. And somewhere, I knew, Grandma Alina was smiling.